Okay, so I can tell you, I can feel the burden of my responsibilities quite literally with the weight of this glorious medallion around my neck. You can actually prove it. I can prove it to you later. Seriously though, it is wonderful to stand here and look over this welcoming assembly. To representatives from other colleges and universities, foundations and organizations, and our neighbors from the Roanoke region, thank you so much for coming out to our university today. Your presence is an honor to me and a reminder of the ties that Hollins has with other institutions entrusted with building a stronger society and region. My very special thanks goes out to our students, I love you, faculty, staff, alumni, current and former trustees, past presidents of Hollins, and friends of the university. You have all welcomed me so warmly and wholeheartedly. And you have made me even more aware of the preciousness of my charge as your president. And I hope you will understand that I need to give a special shout out to my family and friends whose love has brought me to this occasion and whose support will sustain me in the years ahead. My love and gratitude goes out to you all, and I recognize that I have indeed been blessed beyond all measure. Today is not only the presidential inauguration, but also the day that commemorates our founders. Today we celebrate the long and rich history of Hollins University, now in its 176th year of trailblazing among institutions of higher learning. And we seek to honor all those who worked to establish the institution in its early decades. Charles Lewis Koch led Hollins and devoted his life to the higher education of women during an era when few women imagined earning a college degree. And with his wife, daughters, sons, brother-in-law, all working with him, Hollins was decidedly a family affair. His grandchildren continued the tradition along with relatives by marriage who taught, worked, and attended Hollins. We are delighted to have several members of the Koch family with us here today. At the same time, we recognize and honor members of what was once known as the Old Fields community. These men and women, some of whom worked as enslaved people until the end of the Civil War in 1865, built and maintained our campus facilities and took care of Hollins students and faculty during our early days. Most did not choose this work on their own volition, and their contributions went unrecognized for far too long. Today, in the more expansive commemoration of our Founders' Day that my predecessor, President Emerita Nancy Gray, initiated, we welcome members of the Hollins community who are descended from those who provided foundational contributions to our campus to her infancy. Can we all stand to recognize our founders and their families today? Thank you. It takes a lot of people to bring us to significant moments like this one. We are all continuously engaged in the process of becoming our best selves. And I want to thank my extended family, friends, colleagues, mentors, and former students for helping to make me a better version of myself. Your involvement and support in my life are a true blessing. Many of you are here today, and others are here in spirit. As you watch this event that's being webcast worldwide. Hello, India and Singapore. I know that my journey was made possible by the support and encouragement of others, especially my family. I would like to acknowledge my mom in particular, who let me recently know that I keep talking about my dad in all my interviews and talks, as if he alone did all the parental heavy lifting. Mom, I know that you were always there, behind the scenes, clearing the way for me in large ways and small. I remember the many times you hid freshly cooked food for your 2 daughters so we did not have to eat the leftovers after the men had eaten. You always figured out a way, Mom, to outsmart patriarchy. So here's to you, Mom. Despite not studying past high school, you are the sharpest and smartest woman I know. Dad, I love you too. And then there are Todd and Aaron and Josh, my sons and husband. Your love, support, and cooking skills have made it possible for me to stand here today, and above all, has kept me grounded. No matter what position in life you reach, when your child yells in the morning, "Mom, I can't find my socks. What did you do with them?" So we go sock hunting before anyone can leave the house that morning. No matter what major speech you must give or important decision you must make, everyone needs socks on their feet. And somehow that small detail grounds you in what really matters and recenters you in this universe. These first few moments of this talk have been intensely personal for me, speaking about my life and the precious people in my life. I want to now speak about another life, the life of the mind, and the life of a Hollins University community. As you know, I am an economist by training, but I am a university president by choice. Those of us who engage in the discipline of economics today are more often more comfortable with equations, statistics, and numbers than we are with words. Modern economists do not typically concern themselves with metaphysical matters, the questions of spirit and soul. We have long thought that what mattered was to quantify information and create economic models that would promote tangible economic growth and development nationally and locally. But in many ways, we were and are short-sighted. Short-sighted because we overlooked the fact that every number, every demand curve, every statistical report on intensive margins is nothing but an abstraction, a mere reflection of human life and of the infinite series of decisions we make that constitute unnumbered trips around the sun. We were late to the realization that we don't move the demand curve by moving the supply curve. We move the demand curve by moving the hearts and minds, dreams and aspirations of the people around us. Don't get me wrong. I firmly believe that the discipline of economics is essential to understanding the world and how it operates. but I know that it cannot address several of the world's most pressing questions and their immeasurable answers. We are more than the sum of our parts. Thankfully, Hollins and other institutions of higher learning, grounded in the tradition of the liberal arts, have never lost sight of what is truly important. Together, we all have the responsibility to help challenge and educate our students so that they can understand their role in our larger society and become drivers of positive change within their sphere of influence. That search for authentic purpose is ultimately what a Hollins education is all about, and why I am so proud to be part of this mission. One that is devoted to women, and we know that the need for women's leadership has never been more important. I have personally experienced the transformational power of an all-women's education, and it has helped me become whom I am today. Ever since I was a young girl, I always wanted to change the world. It was indeed fortuitous when years later I accepted a faculty position, which in my mind was just a temporary assignment for me, but it turned out to be my life's calling. Just a few months into my new role, I quickly realized that preparing the next generation of leaders and change makers who will go on and leave their own impact on this world is much more impactful in magnitude than taking this work on change on my own. This is what we economists call the multiplier effect, the power we have as educators. Indeed, I am so grateful to devote my life to education, preparing you to lead lives of consequence and change the world within your sphere of influence. Many of us can quote or misquote Henry David Thoreau's famous aphorism, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation, but it is a characteristic of wisdom not to do desperate things." Few are aware that this maxim comes from an essay in Walden entitled Economy. And fewer still know the argument that surrounds this conclusion. Thoreau was not speaking of desperation in the physical sense that may be caused by a calamity or because of poverty. To the contrary, he was speaking of desperation of people who don't have to worry about physical shelter or the next meal. Those who are reasonably comfortable in life, most of us. We know that it is always safer to worry about our next paycheck than the next generation. It is always tempting to stand back rather than lean in. It's always easier to keep your own counsel than to speak out. It's always easier to keep your head down than to lift your eyes up. Acts of quiet desperation. But when the psalmist urges us to look up at the mountains in search of help, levavi oculis, we lift up our eyes. We are the only things those pilgrims will see. We are their hope, and it is through our hands that God's work is accomplished. Since I arrived at Hollins, I have witnessed firsthand an unwavering dedication to make our society and world a better place for all. I have seen how we intentionally are developing and equipping future leaders, creators, policymakers, and citizens who understand their role in society, their social responsibility, and the need to serve the communities that they are a part of. During spring break last year, 4 Hollins students embarked on a trip of a lifetime, a 12-day hike in South American Andean mountains on the Cordillera Huayhuash. Many of you may be familiar with that. It's one of the top 10 trekking circuits in the world. Unfortunately, when they arrived, they encountered a nightmare. What happened in Peru when they landed was widespread flooding and massive landslides had devastated the country's northern region and blocked all access to Huayhuash. A lot of people would have surrendered to Thoreau's quiet desperation and booked the first flight back home. But our students' reaction? We are here, how can we help out? Those 4 students subsequently provided crucial aid in some of the country's hardest hit areas. For them, it was a life-changing experience. And their story isn't an isolated one. Another student is working to foster greater awareness of the issues that people living with disabilities face, and is taking her activism to a statewide level through her appointment to the Virginia Board of People with Disabilities. And a number of Hollins students are actively working with the Small Cities Initiative, an innovative partnership between Hollins and Virginia Tech, whose goal is to study issues of resilience among small urban cities across the United States, Russia, and Germany. Hollins students are making a real-world impact in creative ways and on progressive fronts. They are not leading lives of quiet desperation. Our students today are continuing to fulfill the promise that extends back through decades of Hollins history. Nearly 80 years ago, Mildred Persinger, class of 1939, who turns 100 years old this year, embarked on a career working for women's rights and human rights, racial justice, and sustainable development. As an organizer and activist, she served as a member of the National Board of the YWCA and worked with the National Council of Negro Women on the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voter Registration Act. In Mexico in 1975, she headed the planning and management of the first NGO forum that ran concurrently with the first UN World Women's Conference. It was the start of the worldwide women's movement, with issues on the table such as women's rights and security, the world economy, South African apartheid, and conflict in the Middle East. Mildred continued to work on those same issues in a 30-year-long career as the world's YWCA representative to the United Nations. Mildred Persinger did not lead a life of quiet desperation. I could go on and on. Every day, our students and alumni proudly act upon the philosophy demonstrated by our students who went to Peru. We are here. How can we help out? They are working through community outreach and advocacy, locally, nationally, and globally. They are building upon and making significant contributions in every sphere of life, from the political to the academic, from the corporate to the volunteer arenas. As Jane Goodall stated, you cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference. And you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. The wisdom that Thoreau mentions, the wisdom to not accept the status quo, but to actively choose to make a positive difference, is here at Hollins. Thanks to the remarkable faculty, the hardworking and creative staff, and the devoted alumni and trustees and friends of the university, the education our students receive at Hollins, inside and outside the classroom, helps them develop the wisdom to lead lives of consequence. At Hollins, as 176 years of our forebears have shown, we will continue to reject choosing lives of quiet desperation, not because it's easy, but because we know no other way. We are called to a different sort of life, a life of noisy exuberance, a life of joy and hope, and a life worth celebrating, not because of our financial success, but because we are making a positive difference in our own lives, a difference in the lives that we have touched in our lifetime, and a difference in the lives of the thousands of students yet to come to Hollins, whose lives will be enriched and strengthened by the choices we make right here today. As Indra challenged us in her address, to thrive into the future, we must answer the question, how will Hollins reinvent and reimagine herself? Which disruptive innovation are we going to embrace? I want you to join me to build a thriving Hollins of tomorrow so we can continue the noble purpose of educating women who lead lives of consequence. By what Hollins can do and must do and will do today, tomorrow, together. Thank you again so much for entrusting me with this precious, precious opportunity.